This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
More than 60 people killed in a series of attacks in Nigeria's northern region. Guinea's military junta bars its members from running in the next elections. And from poverty to prosperity, China documents its journey to building a moderately prosperous society. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business, South Sudan inks a deal allowing the resumption of crude oil exports. And in sport, Namibia men's cricket team gears up for an historic debut appearance at this year's ICC T20 World Cup. We begin this news hour in Nigeria, where authorities say more than 60 people have been killed in a wave of attacks in various parts of the country. In Kaduna State, more than 30 people are reported to have been killed in a raid by bandits. In Sokoto, criminal gangs attacked 5 towns and set fire to military camps, killing at least 17 members of the security forces and 2 civilians. Meanwhile, Borno State also suffered casualties when suspected Islamist militants attacked a convoy of soldiers and vigilantes. Well, to give us an update and a clearer picture of what's happening on the ground in these areas, we're joined by CGTN's Tesem Akende. Hi, Tesem. What is the latest in the security situation, especially in northern Nigeria, where most of these killings occurred?
Well, the latest is that these attacks, you have different situations or different scenarios for different parts of northern Nigeria. In the north central, you have the farmer-herder clashes with pockets of killings, up and, going on. We had recent killings here in Jos as well a few weeks ago. In Kaduna State, which is a few hours from where I stand in the northwest part of the country, we had 34 killed yesterday. And of course, in other parts of the country as well, in Sokoto, where the military base was attacked, in Borno State. These are all in northern Nigeria. The situation as it stands is that there are peculiar challenges for different regions. This is ongoing, but the enemies of peace are being opposed, and they are being attacked. Just yesterday, we had in Kaduna State where 34 people were killed. We've had suspects arrested, 2 of them. Many are injured, about 7 people are injured. They are here in Plateau State receiving medical attention. So the challenges are still there, but the Nigerian state is also confronting them squarely.
Sam, not long ago, you'd given us some very hopeful news about progress being made against bandits in these regions, kidnappers being arrested, for instance. And then we hear of this escalation in attacks. Why do you think this is?
Well, it is a bit normal. I've covered warfare, I've covered the security concerns for a while now. Many times you have this kind of scenarios. It's not as though there are no gains by security agencies. There have been so much bombardments in Zamfara State. There have been several bombardments in Sokoto and other states as well. So in this kind of situations, you have the enemies of peace talking about bandits and kidnappers and all of that, leaving certain areas to go strike in different regions. It's not as though nothing is happening. Something is indeed happening. We know that as much as these attacks are happening, they are also receiving a lot of firepower from security agencies. Many times they wouldn't just say much, but we know as journalists who follow this up, we know that a lot of them are being dealt with very well.
Desem, you have spoken to us about what state authorities are doing. Just give us some detail on what federal authorities are saying about these latest attacks and the ongoing violence.
Well, in June, President Muhammadu Buhari was in Borno State, the epicenter of insurgency in Nigeria, where he gave the military authorities marching orders to win the war against insurgency and other threats confronting the Nigerian state. That is at the federal level. At the state level or at the regional level here in northern Nigeria, the governors met in Kaduna, which is the region's political capital, where the security of the region was one of the main issues that was discussed. Sadly, we had attacks in Kaduna State where the meeting held with 34 people, confirmed by the government. So both at the federal and at the regional level, something is happening. Not just did the governors meet yesterday, we also had traditional rulers who are very key elements, in driving the peace efforts, also gathering yesterday. So a lot is going on. We're also hopeful that before long, these threats will be confronted and defeated very well. But I must tell you that as journalists following up the situation, there's also a lot of synergy. The government at the federal level has invested a lot in acquisition of military hardware and software. So a lot is going on, and we're hopeful that these efforts will pay off so that a lot of people who have been displaced will get back to their homes, ancestral lands, to farm and return to their sources of livelihoods. A lot is going on, that I can assure you, that I can say.
Tesem, thank you so much for all that. Tesem Akinde speaking to us on that issue. Well, in Guinea, the military junta has barred its members from running in the upcoming national elections. The junta has set the length of the transition period to elections with an 81-member transitional national council. Over the past 2 weeks, the junta has been consulting with public figures as well as business leaders to map out a framework for a transitional government. According to the charter of the transition, coup leader Mamadi Doumbouya is to be president of that transitional government. It is to be composed of a civilian prime minister and cabinet, none of whom are allowed to be candidates in the next elections. The charter also specifies that 30% of the transitional national council must be made up of women. That council is to include a president as well as 2 vice presidents who are also barred from running for office in the next elections. For analysis on this transitional process, we're joined by Dr. Isaka Soare, Director of Sahel and West Africa Program at Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and based in Conakry. Thank you so much for joining us, Isaka. Guinea's junta appears to be focused on retaining control of the transition process. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the charter you referred to highlights a number of requirements that any successful transition at this time, when you have international instruments at the level of ECOWAS and the African Union that call for certain things. So it's classical when they bar members of the transitional government or the transitional national council to stand in the elections that are aimed to put an end to this transition. So I think they are aligning themselves with that. But of course, you can see that they would want to also be present in the various institutions of this transition.
What do you think transition officials have been, why do you think transition officials have been blocked from running for office in these next elections?
Both the ECOWAS's additional protocol on good governance and the African Charter on Democracy elections bar members of, what they bar from standing in the elections aimed at restoring constitutional order are those who took part in the unconstitutional change of government. But it has been a classical pattern over the past few years that in various African countries, it is classical that you bar members of the transitional government because you would want to have a free and fair process. And if people have been playing a role in preparing the end of the transitional process, are taking part in these elections, the suspicion is that they may be influencing the process on their behalf. That's why it is generally a common practice nowadays that you have these people as neutral and impartial as possible so that you have a level playing ground for those who are competing for these elections.
Isaka, considering what you've said and also everything that's happening in Guinea, on one hand, the majority of Guineans seeming to support the ousting of Condé. On the other, there's pressure from bodies such as ECOWAS opposing the coup and also being concerned about Condé, who is still being detained at this stage. Should Guinea be allowed to resolve the situation by themselves, or should outside input continue?
Well, I think Guinea would need, as part of ECOWAS, part of the international community. You cannot work in silo nowadays. There is interdependence. And I think these instruments of ECOWAS and the African Union are based on the cumulative analysis of the record of coup. What happened in Guinea is the 44th military coup in West Africa since independence. When you look at how they came about, the instruments that are against the military coups, I think it was based on the cumulative analysis of these ones. So in my view, it's in the interest of Guineans and the new rulers to work hand in hand with these regional organizations. And if they feel that they have imposed certain restrictions or sanctions that they do not appear to be realistic, is to have a discussion with them. Particularly, in my view, what is lacking in this transitional charter is the duration of the transition, which Article 77 of it says that this will be agreed by consultation with socio-political actors. So once you have that one and you have an agreement on what content you're given to the transition, I think they should and they would work hand in hand with ECOWAS and the African Union.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Isaka Suare, speaking to us on the situation in Guinea at the moment. Always staying with Guinea, and in the past week, the country has taken steps to assure world leaders that Guinea is on the road to stability. Speaking to the UN General Assembly, Guinea's ambassador, Ali Diane, said that the country was working on a return to constitutional order following the ouster of President Alpha Condé. Condé had been in power for more than a decade. He'd seen his popularity plummet, though, when he sought a third term last year, saying term limits did not apply to him. We'll turn our attention to Libya now, where 2 more mass graves have been discovered in Taruna. The General Authority for Research and Identification of Missing Persons says the bodies are to be exhumed from the graves. Taruna city is located southeast of the capital, Tripoli. It was under the control of the Al-Qaniyat militia, which had a reputation for its brutal tactics. The militia had initially sworn allegiance to a former government in Tripoli, but it switched sides in the civil war and aligned itself with the eastern-based forces of General Khalifa Haftar in 2019. Official Libyan sources say Haftar's forces and affiliated militia committed war crimes and acts of genocide in the period between April 2019 and June of 2020. Well, to discuss this further, CGTN's Adel Amrouki joins us from Cairo. Hi, Adel. What has the reaction been from General Haftar about all this?
Like previous accusations, General Khalifa Haftar has not addressed or commented on these accusations. Generally, during the decade-long war, and especially in 2019, when both the Eastern forces and the Western forces were in a fight over territories in Libya, whenever one side gains control of another territory that the other controlled, they would report incidents of finding mass graves. Khalifa Haftar, when he reached southern Tripoli, for instance, has made the same reports and accusations, and also the Western forces, when they took back some of the territories that Haftar was controlling, they too made the same accusations. Now, a bit early to understand really what's going on, but at least officially, Haftar has not addressed these concerns, as has his stance been during the past years when similar accusations came up. Also, the United Nations, which strongly condemned finding these mass graves and showed its extreme concern in several occasions, not just about this week's discovery, it has never pointed fingers at anyone in Libya, accusing them of being responsible for such atrocities. So in general, it means that there is an investigation ongoing. International community wants an investigation to take place, but no one has enough evidence to accuse a specific person, except of course the rival parties, which in Libya, who usually point the fingers at each other without solid investigations.
Adel, added to that investigation you've just mentioned, following the discovery of these 2 more graves, what else is expected to happen next?
Well, first of all, the identification of the bodies is a prime concern and is a prime mission for investigators. And why is that? Because it will identify what has been happening. Tarhuna, as you briefly mentioned, was a city that Haftar forces controlled for a lot of time, southern of Libya as they prepared to enter, southern of Tripoli as they prepared to take control over the Libyan capital, but then they withdrawn. So that means also in the hospitals of Tarhuna, forces from Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army, troops there, they were being injured and treated in hospitals there. One of the mass graveyards was found not far away from one of the hospitals in Tarhuna. So who is buried will be a clear indication about the gravity of the concern. Were they forces that belonged to Khalifa Haftar, and as he withdrawn from the city, he had to bury them rapidly and quickly, sort of paying respect to their bodies instead of leaving their corpses exposed? That could be one explanation to it. Are they mercenaries, non-Libyans who have been engaged in the war, and therefore it might give a clearer explanation of how they were killed or why they were killed? Or are they civilians and they have been assaulted, and there have been someone responsible for killing them outside the regulations of the law, and even outside the norms of having a war at a place or at a conflict zone? So the identity of these people will definitely give an indication about whether we're seeing and talking about war crime, or it was just people who rushly been buried because of the ongoing war and the race over controlling territories in Libya.
Adel, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Good to be speaking to you. Adel Amrouki speaking to us from Cairo. Well, world leaders and senior officials continued with closing discussions at the 6th and final day of the UN General Assembly in New York. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett on Monday addressed the assembly, followed by officials from the UAE, Syria, and the DPRK, among others. Reporting from New York, here's Sarah Walton.
Attendees at the final day of the UN General Assembly's high-level week were expecting to hear a speech from the current Afghan ambassador to the UN, even though he was seated by the previous government that was overthrown by the Taliban in August. But he withdrew his name from the list of speakers. The Taliban has put forward their own spokesperson who they wish to speak on their behalf at the event here, but the UN Credentials Committee is yet to meet to make a decision on that. And so this year there will be no speech on behalf of Afghanistan to the General Assembly. We did, though, hear from the new Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, the first new leader for that country in more than a decade after he took over from Benjamin Netanyahu. In his speech, he chose not to respond to some very stark criticism from the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, in his speech last week. Instead, Mr. Bennett focused very much on Iran in his speech, and he said despite efforts of some UN member states to revive the Iran nuclear deal, he said that Iran's nuclear program should not be allowed to develop because it poses a threat to Israel.
Iran's nuclear program has hit a watershed moment, and so has our tolerance. Words do not stop centrifuges from spinning.
Now, Iran has always maintained that it is developing a nuclear program for entirely peaceful purposes, but Mr. Bennett there suggesting that his country would take action to stop it developing any further. Now, as we come to the end of this General Assembly high-level week, there are some standout moments, probably from the very beginning. The speech by Joe Biden, his first as President of the United States here at the United Nations. It marked really a return to a belief in multilateralism for the United States after 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency. Then there was the announcement from President Xi Jinping that China will no longer finance the building of coal-fired power plants abroad, something that's been welcomed by green campaigners. There were moments of controversy, such as the appearance in person here of the Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, even though he publicly stated he wasn't vaccinated against COVID-19. And then his own health minister tested positive for the virus just hours after he was inside the building behind me mixing with other delegates. And that is probably something that is going to stand out going forwards. The number of heads of states that did come here in person to give their address, even though the United States had asked them to stay away so that this did not become a COVID-19 super spreader event. It shows really the importance that many countries still place on the United Nations and of being at this event in person. But it is naturally going to lead to questions over whether it was safe to hold the General Assembly High Level Week in this format rather than doing it virtually during the pandemic. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
Well, Germany's center-left Social Democratic Party has won the country's federal election, beating the Conservative Party of outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel. The Social Democrats' candidate Olaf Scholz says that he will seek to form a coalition with the Green Party and a Free Democratic Party. Ryan Thompson reports.
Olaf Scholz is taking a victory lap, now that results have confirmed a narrow but clear victory for the Social Democrats. Over 25% of German voters have backed Scholz and the SPD to lead the next government. Speaking to reporters Monday, Scholz outlined his plans to take on Germany's top job and form a new coalition in the parliament.
My idea is that we will be very fast in getting a result for this government, and it should be before Christmas if possible. On the other hand, you should know Germany always has coalition governments, and it was always stable.
But it's not yet clear who will be in that coalition. Many expect it to include two other parties, a first in modern German history. It's unlikely that the current Grand Coalition between Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats and the SPD will continue. Sunday's results have come as a major loss to the CDU and its candidate Armin Laschet. However, he's vowing to be part of the next government, offering the possibility the CDU could rule with the FDP and the Green Party, a so-called Jamaica coalition, the colors of the country's flag.
For us, we can say that no party can read a mandate to govern for itself, to govern out of this result, not even us. The Federal Board and the Presidium of the CDU agree that we are ready for talks on a so-called Jamaica coalition.
Many have criticized Laschet for refusing to give up at a time when Germany is undergoing a monumental political change. Sunday's election marks the end of Chancellor Angela Merkel's 16 stable years at the head of government, with some uncertain times now ahead.
Well, let's now take a short break and return more in Africa Live, including from poverty to prosperity, China documents its journey to building a moderately prosperous society. And China's Hannah province puts in place measures to provide new opportunities for trade cooperation between China and Africa.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. China has issued a white paper on the country's path to a moderately prosperous society in all respects, known as Xiongkang. The white paper is titled China's Epic Journey from Poverty to Prosperity. It documents the realization of all-round moderate prosperity as declared in July and marks a critical steps towards the country's national rejuvenation. Sun Ye has the details from Beijing.
The white paper was published this morning to document China's epic journey from poverty to moderate prosperity and to share that unique experience in modernization with the rest of the world. The white paper terms prosperity a feat of all-around development, detailing progress made in economy, democracy, culture, people's livelihood, as well as the environment. And in the morning's press briefing, there is a clear definition for what prosperity entails for China. Let's take a listen.
Completing the building of a moderately prosperous society marks a key step in the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Moderate prosperity has been a long-cherished dream of the Chinese nation. Since the founding of the CPC, it has committed to pursuing the happiness of the Chinese people and the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. It has been working hard to make the life better for the people. The white paper points out that achieving the building of a moderately prosperous society has greatly enhanced the confidence and pride of the Chinese nation.
Now, to put that kind of growth into perspective, there are a few figures also released with the white paper. China's economic strength has increased significantly, with its GDP reaching over 100 trillion yuan last year from less than 70 billion yuan in 1952. And per capita GDP rose from less than $100 in 1952 to over $10,000 in 2020. And for years, China has also ranked as the world's very first in terms of added value in manufacturing sector, and the white paper says China has been the world's largest manufacturing country for the past 11 years. The white paper also says the fact that China was the first major global economy to recover from the pandemic shows the resilience of the economy, and that strength and resilience has translated into bettering livelihoods for the people. Personal incomes have grown steadily over the years, and employment rate has remained stable even in the past 2 years. There is also China's feat in eradicating absolute poverty, giving people in urban as well as in rural areas sustained sources of income. Now, in introducing the white paper, Xu, the official we just heard, also says it's through extreme hard work across all of China that make these things possible, but by always aiming for people's better sense of security, better sense of gaining, and better sense of happiness, that epic journey from poverty to prosperity was made possible.
Well, for more, we're joined by Dr. Emmanuel Matambo, Research Director at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you so much for joining us, Emmanuel. What lessons can Africa learn from China's progress?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and good day to your viewers. There is a lot that we can learn from China. First of all, the first thing that we could learn from them is their work ethic, which is a very admirable component of the Chinese general temperament. Not only that, there is a lot of foresight that we have seen from the Communist Party of China, especially. I mean, even this white paper that today China celebrates is an old dream that started, formally speaking, in 1982 at the 12th National Congress, when Deng Xiaoping then said China has to achieve some moderate prosperity and that it had to double its GDP by the end of the 1980s. And China has not failed to meet any of the goals that it set for itself. So foresight and the guts to implement, the guts to be bold in order to follow through with one's promises. I think those are just some of the things that we could learn from China. And of course, how China has admirably dealt with the coronavirus pandemic. It was the first nation to reopen its economy, and not only that, it was the first nation as well to start achieving positive economic growth under the difficult circumstances that were imposed by the coronavirus pandemic on the globe.
Emmanuel, what are the implications of China's advancement on the world and Africa in particular?
Well, there are actually a lot of good tidings about China's implementation. And the goodness about China is that when China closed in on itself historically, it did not grow. But when China opened up to the rest of the world, it was on those matters that China really grew. So today we expect that with China's prosperity and its increasingly modernizing nature, it will open up opportunities for Africa. Just last year, China was the biggest recipient of foreign direct investment. So all those actually very auspicious realities that will be put to the benefit of Africa. So we expect that, of course, from China, we're going to get a lot of investment, not only in material forms, but then we'll also get investment in terms of skills transfer, which has actually seen China to be the country that it is today. And Africa desperately needs a lot of skills transfers, not only in hard infrastructure, which China has done admirably well on the continent, but also the training of human capital on the African continent. So we should actually be glad that China is reaching the milestones that it is actually currently reaching.
Emmanuel, thank you so much for all that. Dr. Emmanuel Matambo, a research director at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Well, the second China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo is currently underway in Changsha, Hunan province. Officials and insiders say the province has put in place a series of measures to provide new opportunities for trade cooperation between the two regions in the post-pandemic era. Juju reports.
To provide better and convenient financial services for Chinese and African businesses, the provincial government of Hunan set up a China-Africa cross-border RMB service center in the Hunan branch of the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China earlier this year. The center has teamed up with the African banks in countries such as Egypt, Nigeria, and Kenya for providing renminbi-related services. It also provides foreign exchange settlement and purchase services in 5 African countries.
Earlier, we always felt that economic and trade cooperation with Africa needs to be improved further. For example, our investment in Africa is booming in technical cooperation and engineering contracting sectors. But very few African products are actually being imported into China. The cross-border RMB service center will help improve this situation and make it easier for African products to be exported to China.
Hunan is also building a pilot zone for in-depth economic and trade cooperation between China and Africa. It is more like an incubator program for enterprises from both sides and provides services in 8 areas such as brand building and e-commerce operations. The province has vowed to create new growth drivers for China-Africa cooperation and showcase its experiences as an example for bilateral cooperation at the local level.
We focus on 1 core region and 5 areas in Changsha, Chenzhou, Yueyang, Liuyang, and also the Yuhua district. They will have their characteristic focuses. We will first introduce non-resource-based products from Africa to Changsha, deep process them here and then promote them to the market. In this way, we can let trade drive our industry and manufacturing. Also, as a pilot zone, the systems there must be creative. We will figure out ways to simplify the application process for documents such as the health certificate for foreigners, detention certificate, and qualification certificate, so that it will be easier for experts and talents from abroad to live and work here.
Hunan province has also implemented measures such as building a center for distributing and processing non-resource-based products from Africa and expanding cooperation between the pilot free trade zones in the province and African countries. Juju, CGTN, Changsha.
Well, CGTN's Yu Li is covering the trade fair for us and joins us live from Changsha. Hi, Li. Thank you so much for being on the program with us. How has the day been like at the Trade Expo?
Hi, the expo actually went very well. I feel like it is as hot as the temperature here in Changsha. There were dozens of forums, conferences, and exhibition tours of many themes held in the past 2 days, including youth innovation and entrepreneurship, healthcare development, infrastructure, cooperation, financial investment, and even fishery products promotion. All areas you can think of. And there's an exhibition held to showcasing products from African countries like coffee, wine, and chili and jams, just name a few of them. A lot of deals have been made during the expo, and there will be a press conference tomorrow outlining the outcome of the expo. Back to you, Hannah.
Lee, how has COVID-19 affected this expo?
Yeah, because of the pandemic, only a few participants from Africa attended the expo in person. So the organizers offer the expo on the cloud, complete with cloud conferences and cloud transactions to enable remote communications. And the presidents from Rwanda, Senegal, and Algeria had made the remarks at the opening ceremony through video, for example. And most of the work have been for African exhibitions have been done by companies here serving as intermediaries. So the pandemic has definitely affected the deal making, but not that much. Some deals were actually made before the expo with brokers like ICBC and South Africa Standard Bank. We're talking straight business to business exchange. For businesses and consumers alike, there are websites called Kilimo and Kili Select that sell African products to China and likewise help Chinese goods reach African consumers. And there are live streaming sales online held in website platforms like Taobao and Jingdong as well. The whole point of the expo is to establish a bridge between China and African countries. That's why a lot of measures have been taken to make sure it all went smoothly. Now, that's all from me. Back to you.
Lee, thank you so much for all that. You, Lee, speaking to us from the trade fair in Changsha. Let's now take a short break. Your business news is coming up after the break, including South Sudan inks deal allowing resumption of crude oil exports. And South Africa's insurance industry records a surge due to COVID-19 and riots.
It's taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Time now for the business news. South Sudan's government says it has struck an agreement with tribal protesters allowing for the resumption of crude oil exports. Demonstrators from the Beja tribes had forced the closure of Port Sudan and the airport last week, leaving South Sudan stuck with its crude exports. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
The week-long blockade was expected to force the South Sudanese government to shut down oil production on Monday, but instead exports will resume after a deal was struck on Sunday with Beja tribe elders. The details of that deal have not been disclosed. Protesters had been blocking roads leading to the port in recent weeks and forcing them to shut. They are against a 2020 peace deal between the government and rebel groups, which they say marginalizes and does not represent them. South Sudan's government says it is doing all it can to ensure that oil production and export continues.
Efforts are underway to have this issue resolved so that our oil can flow. So the president also has been asked by the cabinet or requested by the cabinet to make all the necessary contacts so that the oil can continue to flow.
That blockade at Port Sudan had also cut off supply of some of the chemicals needed in the oil fields for extraction of petroleum. South Sudan is currently producing about 154,000 barrels of crude daily. Crude oil from South Sudan is now being loaded at the port for export. The resumption of trade is crucial for the South Sudan's economy, which is heavily dependent on oil proceeds to fund the day-to-day running of the country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Over in South Africa, the insurance industry has been hit hard by COVID-19 claims. The industry recorded over 1 million payments in the last year. It also had to deal with the recent riots in the country after hundreds of businesses and other property were destroyed. However, as CGTN's Sumitra Naidu now reports, insurers remain well capitalized.
South African insurers have had to pay out claims for over 1 million deaths in the last year, largely as a result of COVID-19. Beneficiaries received over $3.4 billion.
Be people cashing in their savings policies or people retiring, but 350 billion rand is a significant contribution to the South African economy, and obviously it helps for people to do their own financial planning to make sure that they have the financial resources, for instance, to be able to retire comfortably. So definitely a significant contribution to the South African economy.
Despite the record payouts, South African insurers proved agile.
What we've seen in the last 15 to 18 months has been probably a 1 in 100-year event in terms of what's happened. So it has been much worse than you would expect normally. But thankfully, the insurers have built up sufficient reserves to be able to pay those claims.
The insurance industry is actually very well capitalized. And even though they took quite a big hit in their income statement, so some of them took reasonably big losses for those claims, the capital they were holding was more than sufficient to cover for the risks that they were facing. So all in all, it has actually shown that the insurance industry, in the way that it's regulated and the additional capital that it holds to support the claims and to deliver on promises that it makes, are well structured, have held up in this environment.
It's almost 2 years since the pandemic began, but South African insurers are not letting their guard down. Many have increased their COVID reserves in case of further waves and are raising awareness around risk cover.
While the industry has taken a while to recover from the consumer demand side because of the unemployment and loss of jobs through last year and the ability for people to get economically active again, I think the awareness of and the demand for insurance is still high.
According to ASISA, the life insurance industry held assets of $232 billion at the end of June 2021, while liabilities amounted to $209 billion. With $23 billion in free assets, the industry has almost doubled the reserve buffer required by the solvency capital requirements. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Zanzibar's President Dr. Hussein Mwinyi has launched a program aimed at uplifting small business. Apart from issuing special identity cards for small traders, the government there has also announced a $43 million package to support the sector. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
Tanzania's semi-autonomous island of Zanzibar has begun issuing identity cards to informal traders on the island. Informal traders, who make up more than a third of Zanzibar's 1.6 million people, will be formally recognized and given special areas to do business in. The government says the recognition of traders, along with $43 million to support their activities, will have numerous benefits.
Giving traders special identity cards is important in formalizing their activities. Identifying them in a legal sense is among the important contributors to our economy, as well as formalizing other services for them, which includes getting financing from financial institutions, including banks.
Petty traders in the country have generally reacted positively to the government's initiative, but some are calling for transparency in the issuing of IDs and have requested that the average cost of $9 per ID be revised. Statistics point to 76% of Tanzania's non-agricultural workforce being in the informal sector. About 1.6 million identity cards have already been issued to petty traders on mainland Tanzania over the last 2 years. And like Zanzibar, the government on the mainland has similar plans to upgrade identity cards for its roughly 4 million petty traders. It believes doing so will broaden the country's tax base, giving the traders better lives in the process. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
We're going to go to a short break. More to come on Africa Live.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Egypt hosted the 14th SAMAA Festival for Religious and Spiritual Music this week, with groups representing countries from Africa, Asia, and Europe showcasing their talent in religious and spiritual chanting music. Yasser Kim was there and has the details.
SAMAA means listening in Arabic, and that's what the SAMAA Festival is about, listening to each other's religious music and chanting.
SAMAA is not just another festival. It has its own unique personality because it touches the soul and the spirits. The music is about spirituality, and it praises all kinds of prophets and religions. And this is why it has its own popularity here in the North African country.
And indeed, at the backdrop of the historic Salahuddin Citadel, a unique African style was on show by Sudan.
We are participating with Sudanese religious songs and praise for the Prophet. It's all Sudanese music. We are gathered here for our love of God and the Prophet, and it's a chance to meet others from around the globe. The most important thing is religious tolerance. The world should be full of religious tolerance. We are all friends. All religions can call for peace and love between all people.
This group came all the way from France to share their Christian classic songs in this part of the world.
We sing Ave Maria from Caccini, an Italian composer, very representative for the European culture, and I hope you like it.
For us, it's very amazing because we don't know so much Arabic music and Oriental music. So for us, it's a very, very big experience to hear that kind of sounds and that kind of instruments and voices. Also, the way to sing is very different than in Europe. So for us, it's a very, very amazing experience.
The festival took place in two different locations, the ancient citadel and the more modern Hurriya Garden. Here, the Syrians defied all challenges back home to come and perform at the festival for the 5th time.
Year after year, we see a development and improvement in the festival. Sultan El Arifin Group was established 10 years ago, singing Islamic chants, and we set up an academy to teach Islamic singing and chanting in Egypt. We come every year with new songs and rhythms that we have written especially for the occasion.
The different spiritual songs and chanting have touched the hearts of all involved and is testament to the success of the festival.
The SAMAA festival is renowned internationally and not just in Egypt, and with a very good reputation. Many groups have requested to participate in the festival. We only accepted 7 groups from abroad, although many more have requested to participate, but we couldn't accept them because of the circumstances. Throughout the festival, we had 33 groups. Some came from Egypt, while others came from abroad. Others also came from the embassies in Egypt.
The big demand from musical groups and high attendance from the audience guarantees the festival will be back next year for a 15th round. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And now for an update of what's happening in the world of sport. And Namibia's senior men's cricket team will make their first